The game is set on planet Arrakis, where the spice melange was constantly being fought over by the noble Atreides, the insidious Ordos, and the evil Harkonnen. Whoever controlled the spice controlled the Tex-Mexium, and whoever controlled the Tex-Mexium controlled the universe.
Well, yes.
No,
we all know the power of Tex-Mex.
Yes, we do.
Shoot the Core Cast.
All right, welcome to Shoot the Corecast, the official companion podcast to the RF Generation Shmup Club. This is a family-friendly shmup-themed podcast that won't overstep our bounds, so we decided not to Panzer Dragoon. I'm Addicted, also known as Addicted to Shmups, and with me is
MetalFRO, also known as Game Boy Guru. And if you would like to connect with the podcast, you can do so in a multitude of ways. Follow us on Twitter at ShootCoreCast, or you can follow me directly at Game Boy Guru. You can find all the links to podcast feeds and different things on our Linktree page. That is linktr.ee/ShootTheCorecast. Join our Discord, which is linked from there, and that way you can discuss the podcast, join us for a playthrough, talk about shmups in general, etc. If you would, please like, rate, review, subscribe, etc. on your podcast platform of choice. And also follow me on Twitch to get notifications of new streams, since I do stream the Shmup Club game of the month multiple times throughout each and every month. That is twitch.tv/GuruGameBoy.
We would also like to mention the RF Generation community playthrough on forums, or the Discord channel is probably a better way to reach most people these days. I'd also like to mention the monthly playcast, also known as the concert cast, and the collector cast. RF Generation really helps me keep track of games I bought, and I so bad but the other day I swear I had all this in and I was right, but then I opened a tote I had and I found 8 copies of Wii Sports. I don't know what I was thinking, but had I actually looked at my collection, I would have known that I didn't need to buy 8 copies of Wii Sports because I already had 2 copies. So
I would bet you didn't buy 8 copies of Wii Sports. Don't they practically give you a copy when you walk into the door of any Goodwill?
Oh, yeah, that may be. It's been a while, and I also have to check my copies of Crimson Clover. I think every time I say that, Mark MSX gives me a copy.
Nice. Before we really kick things off and kind of get into all the meat and potatoes of the podcast here, I wanted to take a second and acknowledge the fact that this podcast is now 5 years old.
It's old enough to drink. All right.
It's a little strange to think that we've been doing this for 5 years, but we have. So yay for us, I guess.
I'd say to you, I'd say to you, just like the Grinch, for 5 years you've put up with me now.
Oh yeah, well, I could say the same. But anyway, thank you to everyone who's been following the podcast, listening, commenting, answering the questions of the month, playing along with us, and helping us to, I guess, continue to be motivated to do this, because it's been a wild ride, and I'm glad it's not over yet.
Me too. I have to say thank you to everybody who listens. I don't know why you do, but I really appreciate it.
Indeed.
All right, now that we've said our thanks and salutations, Let's move on to the question of the month. What game has all the elements of a traditional shooting game, but doesn't quite get to call itself a shmup? Our first response is from Goji Guy. For me, that would be most run-and-gun games, especially Alien Soldier. High technical, focused on shooting and scoring, sometimes even auto-scrolling, but not a shmup. Yeah, Alien Soldier is a great one. Every time I read one of these, I think, we should put that on. We should put that on. This sounds great, but Alien Soldier would certainly be a fun one to do, maybe for the new year.
Pony Trigon says, Enter the Gungeon. Has all the elements of a bullet hell, but it's a roguelike dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by extension, I would say The Binding of Isaac and all of its kind of related content.
You would definitely do The Binding of Isaac. I know that's one of your favorite games.
Well, I don't know if I'd say one of my favorites, but certainly when early in the Nintendo Switch days, when I was out pretty much buying everything that I could for it, I picked that up, and I think within a couple of weeks of buying that game and starting to play it, I put in something like 30 or 35 hours.
That's a lot. It's a good game, though. I'm wondering, you said back in the early days, you're buying everything you could for it. I feel like, what is this, six years later, we're still buying everything we can for the Switch?
Yeah, but I mean, at that point, I was literally, because the physical releases hadn't really ramped up to the level they're at now. So every time I would go to the store and see a new physical game or two for the Switch, I would almost pick it up. That trend died very quickly because stuff started to come out in large numbers. But yeah, certainly early on, I was buying up everything, and that was one that definitely stuck with me.
Also, Enter the Gungeon is definitely a good game. I think it's like $20 on Switch right now. So I was able to acquire a copy from the library and play through it for a little bit and enjoy the time I had. So that might be another one that we look at putting on as a shmup-adjacent.
Sure.
Variag says, not the kind of stuff I usually play, but there is one game that came to mind from the Sega Saturn, Bulk Slash. It's this weird 3D shmup-adjacent mecha game. It's really good. Oh, Rabby Ribby too, but that's ostensibly on the purpose of a platformer Metrovania bullet hell mix. Bulk Slash is definitely a fun game, but if I remember correctly, that game really shot up in price, right? Isn't it like in the hundreds now?
It might be. Something interesting, though, there's recently been an English translation of the game, and one of the cool things is that the translation not only adds English dub voice acting, which apparently is quite good for a fan project, but it also hacks the game a little bit to add support for the Saturn twin sticks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so if you're a fan of Virtual On,
now you got one.
Bulk Slash is definitely one to check out.
I was going to say, now you can use it for 2 games on the Saturn.
Exactly.
And Rabby Ribby is also pretty good. That is Jumping Flash 3, if I remember correctly, Never Left Japan.
Oh, I was thinking Rabby Ribby is...
Maybe I'm thinking it's wrong.
Was a newer... Yeah, Rabby Ribby is a relatively new-ish, within the last few years.
Or is that the... darn it, they're all running together in my head. Yeah. It's a newer what?
It's a newer game that came out within the last few years. You run around Metroidvania-style game with Rabbit Ear Girl or whatever, but it has bosses that have bullet hell patterns and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just had to do a quick search, and the game I'm thinking of is Robert Mondu.
Oh,
and
okay.
that's the one that never left Japan, Jumping Flash 3. All right.
Drake Tungsten says, basically any 3D stuff, like, I don't know, Star Fox 64. But then it's 3D, so not traditional anyway. This is really a tricky question. I know there are some games that would fit perfectly, but I can't think of them. Maybe Super Amazing Wagon Adventure? Machinarium, or one of the games by that company, has a small shmup section you play to earn a hint. Yeah, I mean, Star Fox 64 is an interesting one. I know Ed considers Star Fox to be a shmup, and I'm pretty sure Mark MSX does as well, even though, yeah, it's a rail shooter, but it has a lot of the hallmarks of a shmup. Star Fox 64 is where you start to deviate because you're on... There are... What's the word I'm looking for? There are free roaming sections where you're not just auto-scrolling to a particular target. So that's where you start to maybe deviate from the formula enough. But Super Amazing Wagon Adventure, as far as I'm concerned, is a shmup. We covered it in December, and we wouldn't have if it wasn't at least shmuppy enough. But I understand why that might not be considered a full shmup, because there are some twin stick, single screen, Robotron 2084 style sections, but the bulk of the gameplay is auto-scrolling left to right or right to left in some cases, shoot 'em up.
When you said shmuppy enough, you reminded me of that ad that was for, remember Tough Enough for the Super Nintendo?
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering, that would be good to modify that to, are you shmuppy enough?
Are you shmup enough?
Here's another sticker you can put on your PBM.
There you go.
All right. Sleep Stardust says Smash TV is the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah, Smash TV is, or you could say stuff like Robotron or any of the stuff that sort of this twin stick type controls. It'd be considered shmup-adjacent. And that includes Maximum Carnage. Am I thinking Geometry Wars had the control set, or am I misremembering that?
Yeah, I think Geometry Wars would have been a twin stick, yeah.
Yeah, well, Smash TV is a twin stick, right? Even on the Super Nintendo, It wasn't. It was a dual controller, so... Yeah, or Robotron. There's a lot you could put in there. Those are a lot of fun. We haven't had a good twin stick shooter. Oh, shoot. Everyone's giving me ideas, darn it. Definitely looking... Yeah, Smash TV would be a fun one to cover. I buy that. Yeah. Well, at least I buy it for $1.
Ah, there you go. More money, more prizes. I love it. Your Dad 1984 says Quarth. And that one got me thinking, because I've always thought of Quarth as a shmup, but in some ways it's not. So it's kind of an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, Quarth is one of the games that to me is infamous for its commercial, which is so weird. This guy look it up on YouTube. It's a weird commercial, but yeah, it's a puzzle shmup hybrid, right? And it definitely has. It's unique.
It's a shmupzl game.
Yeah, I was wondering. That only came up on the Famicom and the Game Boy, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that may be a little hard if we decided to choose that one.
Right.
Bear78 says, Returnal felt very shmup to me. and that's one of the things I was a little bit curious about. Is our first-person shooters considered shmups? Or shmup-like, I should say. You've got your focus fire, which is aiming down sights. And your shoot from the hip, which is your regular fire. And then your bombs are your special weapons or your grenade or whatever have you. The only thing you're not doing is you're not auto-scrolling, so you can't call it technically a shmup. But it definitely has a lot of the elements of a shmup. Which is weird to think about.
Yeah, I almost equate FPS as the first-person equivalent of a top-down twin-stick kind of shoot 'em up.
Oh yeah, I can definitely see that.
Real Lord Dalek said Marchin' Maze.
Oh, good game.
it's been a minute since I thought about that, so I had to look it up and refresh myself on the gameplay. And yeah, there are definite shmuppy elements at work in that game, but I think, yeah, I would tend to agree. It's got a lot of the right elements. It's just that the way that everything is baked is different and doesn't quite fit the mold.
The black sheep of the shmup family. Louis G says Spy Hunter is on this weird continuum where every time someone tries to clone it, they end up with something more and more towards the shmup side of the axis and away from the 79 Monaco GP with guns. Spy Hunter, medium shmuppitude. Super Spy Hunter, more shmuppy. Highway Hunter, even more shmuppy than Super was. Action Fighter literally turns into a shmup. Yeah, this would be sort of neat to do for like a comparison for like maybe a December. We could do a clone. Other than that, I have to say thank you because now the Peter Gunn theme is stuck in my head.
Yeah. Well, and I only somewhat recently acquired Super Spy Hunter thanks to our buddy Duke Togo. So, yeah, I would love to cover that at some point. That might be a fun one to maybe do a car combat shmup showdown or something like that, where we look at Spy Hunter and Super Spy Hunter, Action Fighter, etc., and just sort of take a cursory look at all those games.
Duke recently sent me something too. He said, I saw you playing Gradius 3 Arcade, and I know you like Pain and Suffering. Have you tried a 3DO? So I ended up with a 3DO from him, and I've been trying to play some Road Rash and a couple of other games on here. It is certainly unique in its own right.
Yeah.
All right, where the... Oh, sorry.
MF Blur said, rail shooters, Star Fox, Sin and Punishment, Panzer Dragoon, etc.
Yeah, the rail shooter is sort of interesting. In fact, Panzer Dragoon by itself, I've heard people call it a light gun game without the guns.
Interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, you technically could, right? You could have hook up your GunCon 2s, or well, you don't need the GunCon 3s. You don't need to twirl it around to reload, but you take the GunCon 2s, and you've got that button on the side for reloading, or pedal. Take the Time Crisis approach for your focus shot, and you could just blast away at it. I mean, you really could turn it into an arcade game, but we'll talk more about that later.
Yep.
Kelsey Polnick says, Paperboy. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Everything's out to kill you, and all you're armed with is papers. Smacking the people who don't subscribe, breaking their windows.
Yeah. If memory serves, YouTuber A Skeleton actually thinks of Paperboy as a shmup in some ways. And so, yeah, there's definitely elements there that really fit the bill. I don't think it goes full shmup, but I certainly think that it's in the conversation for something that would be shmup-adjacent. Caleb Parham says, yeah, Smash TV and Total Carnage. By extension, the Geometry Wars series.
Another vote for the Twin Sticks. And that might be something fun to do too for like a December to remember shmup-adjacent event. Smash TV, Maximum Carnage, and there's a third one that came out, isn't there? Not technically by Midway themselves, but and it's something that we talked about it earlier technically, but Xenocrisis, right? We could do all three.
Oh, right.
Of course, if everyone at this point everyone can choose their favorite platform because Xenocrisis has come out on everything. Okay, more to that later. Yep. All right, Corkman77 says Chelnov Atomic Runner. It has almost all the elements of a shmup, but your character is affected by gravity and you have to platform jump. Yeah, this is one of those ones that people keep referring to as hidden gem. I haven't had a chance to try this one, but I've heard many a good thing about it.
Yeah, I know Shmup Junkie loves this game and did include it in his full video covering all the shmups on the Genesis because he felt like it was close enough to warrant inclusion, and I get that. I want to play the Genesis version at some point. Unfortunately, it's expensive these days, but I do remember popping a quarter into a Chelnov arcade cabinet years ago, and I was probably, I don't know, 15 at the time or what have you, and I was a little confused as to what it was I was supposed to do. So I didn't get very far, but yeah, very interesting concept.
Sort of like trying to play Heavy Barrel or Car Warriors in the arcade, and the rotary joysticks aren't working properly. The heck am I doing here? Yep.
Well, Duke Togo jumped in and is going to help us fulfill our one mention per episode for every gaming podcast ever rule by saying Dark Souls bow only run.
As I said, pain and suffering.
That actually sounds like my jam, but
I think you like the Dark Souls series. There's a bunch of different Souls-like games. Dark Souls 3 isn't a bad place to start, or Dark Souls Remastered, or even the Bloodborne, although Bloodborne's more like parry or action-paced. The game you might want to start with at this day and age is Elden Ring.
Sure.
Something so that we can start at the beginning, but your choice. I think you've been playing Zelda for so long. You might be able to take some of the skills on over. Maybe even do a bow only run.
There you go.
Stephen Eider says Mega Man. Yeah, I could see Mega Man being or Rockman being a shmup-adjacent. In some ways, it could be considered a run and gun, or something similar to that effect. It definitely has those elements just baked in a different way.
Yeah. The one thing about the Mega Man series that I think keeps it from being a run and gun is not only the larger emphasis on platforming, but also some of the precision that you have to do, which makes you have to slow down more so than you would in something like a Contra game or even Metal Slug, where the game encourages you to keep moving and keep pushing forward, whereas within Mega Man, the Mega Man series, you can take your time much more, and even in some spots go back and forth to farm enemies for health pickups and things like that if you took a few too many hits and you want to recharge before you get to the boss. So yeah, I can see that.
I thought for a second there you're going to say the voice acting, because that really slows things down. I mean, I could probably do some of that too. Mega Man, we have to get going to defeat Dr. Wywee.
Yes, Dr. Wywee.
Yeah. Hey, I graduated from the GameSack School of Acting.
There you go. Well, Ashley Day also has another vote for Star Fox.
Mari says vehicular combat games. I'm going to throw some stuff out and see what sticks. Yeah, vehicular combat games, you could probably go with Jackal. Jackal is definitely something that flows in that vein. Some people I saw were talking about Combat. Combat could definitely be in there. There's a whole bunch of different stuff that could be, shmuppy, but not quite shmuppy enough.
Sure. I mean, you could even take that into the 3D realm with the Twisted Metal series and similar kinds of games. Nickel Shark said, I guess if I get really loose and creative with the definition, I could say maybe audio surf, especially with the new audio shmup game mode they added. In that game mode, you have to dodge all the blocks while your ship shoots. Yeah, this is not one I'm familiar with.
Well, in the same vein of audio surf, we talked a little bit about, at least in the early days, with the tube shooter, right? And for that, they did.
Yep.
Was it My Chemical Romance? Who was doing the soundtrack for that? I can't remember. But what was the name of the game that we did that sort of? And there was stuff. What was Amplitude and Frequency, right? The two PS2 games done by Harmonix.
Oh, you're talking about Nitrous Oxide.
Yes, N2O.
That we did on PlayStation. Yeah, that was the Crystal Method.
Okay,
soundtrack.
Yep. So there's a lot that can be done musically with stuff on there, or even look at Harmonix, right? Harmonix did Amplitude and Frequency for the PS2 before they went on to do Guitar Hero and Rock Band.
Right.
So there's a lot that you could definitely do with an audio shmup. And isn't I swear there's more to this that came out, right? Because every time I think of audio, I think of Monster Rancher, but that's not quite right. I'm certain that there's some more audio-based shmups out there.
Well, there's Beat Hazard, the Beat Hazard series.
Oh yes, playing with the lightsaber dancing.
Oh, well, no, I was thinking that's Beat Saber.
Oh, Beat Saber. Yeah.
I was thinking the Beat Hazard games. I think they started as mobile titles, but they're on PC as well, where you can have it read your music collection, and then it'll pick a random song and generate a level based on that song. And so based on the sort of ebb and flow of the song, it'll create enemy waves and boss battles and things. I used to play a ton of that on my phone because I had all my music on my phone. And so I would have Beat Hazard just scan my library and create a scenario for me to play against those tracks. So yeah, something similar to that. But when you mentioned Harmonix and Guitar Hero, and I was just thinking, Guitar Hero 3 at the end, Through the Fire and the Flames, is sort of the rhythm game equivalency of Bullet Hell.
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe we do a stream next April where it's just you doing Beat Hazard, Guitar Hero, and then maybe some Trombone Champ.
Huh.
April Fool's stream. Alright, so Or Commander says Assault by Namco. I don't remember what Assault actually is here. It's
a tank game.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the okay. Yeah, it's a twin stick. Yeah, okay. Assault, you could definitely be considered shmup-adjacent. Look at this. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. What was the? There's another one that featured twin controls by Namco called Cyber Sled for the PS1. And that.
Oh,
yep,
yep.
That's not quite like this, but yeah, you can see it as an evolution.
Right.
And so, what do you consider shmuppy, but not shmuppy enough?
Yeah, I mean, kind of along the same lines as what some of the responses that we got. I've always thought of some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the non-auto-scrolling tank-based games as shmuppy, but I could see where people would think that they're more shmup-adjacent. Stuff like Granada on Sega Genesis, or Metal Stoker, I think it is, on the PC Engine, or something like All Rail by Sega, which is a System 16 arcade game. Those would definitely be probably more squarely in the shmup adjacent camp, even though they pretty much contain most of the elements that you would want to look for in a traditional shooting game, minus the auto-scrolling bits. What about you?
For me, I would just say Donkey Kong 3. It's sort of the forgotten Donkey Kong. It definitely plays more like a proto shmup like with Galaga or Galaxian or even Space Invader, and then you'd see anything else. And it's almost like they said, well, we got this radar scope, we got the code for it, what are we going to do? Well, let's throw it in Donkey Kong. As you play as Stanley, the Bugman, who has to shoot bug spray up Donkey Kong's nether regions in order to get him to move and get out of there. It's definitely unique. It might be fun to do if we're doing like shmup-adjacent or some sort of December, like a December score competition or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of these games share some of those, right? We've got first-person shooters, we have light gun or rail shooters, we have running guns. There's a lot that is almost the shmup formula, but isn't quite. And there's a lot of great games that have come out. Oh, even twin sticks. So I'm hoping that we can expand upon these and maybe just do something fun for December, like with the Smash TV and Xeno Crisis, or throw in a twin stick shooter. Something like this helps break the focus, the huge amount of time investment. It helps bring in people who normally wouldn't have time for the shmup of the month.
Sure.
Breaks into bite-sized shmuppiness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so let's talk about, speaking of pain and suffering, let's talk about Gunvein. I heard you were experiencing some troubles with the Stage 4 boss.
Oh, yes. I've been going back and forth, kind of working on the game in handheld mode, with the handheld difficulty that was specifically made for the Switch, and playing it on stick, I was able to get the lowest or the lowest difficulty of the three, the mild difficulty. I was able to get that clear with all three characters on mild, playing on stick. But so far, playing on handheld with the Switch in a flip grip and using, well, not Joy-Con, but a Joy-Con alternative, that I've been trying to see about getting a clear on the handheld game mode, and for some reason I continue to be thwarted, and I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I haven't managed to quite clear it just yet. I'm hoping that I will soon.
Nice. Hopefully you able to get that clear, right after you get back from showing off your skills at Shmup Slam.
Well, that would be nice.
If not, you could definitely ask. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who will probably give you some pointers.
Probably, yeah. In fact, I don't know if there's time in between things. I might have to pull that up and have somebody watch me play for a couple of minutes so that they can maybe give me some suggestions. Have you had time to actually play this lately?
I've played a little bit of Type B. I haven't had too much of a chance. I've been playing the game of adulting more, which is not fun. So I'll get some more of an update on this as we do our next recording. But so far, I've just been practicing the stages over and over again with Type B.
Ah.
All right, let's move on to Shmuppy News. So, Bitmap Bureau has getting ready to release Xenocrisis on the Super Nintendo. And I hear after this that they're moving on to the Nuon. And followed by a port to the CDI.
I don't know about the Nuon or the CDI. But yeah, I mean, Super Nintendo seems like an obvious one because of the controller.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you can, with the buttons and the layout that they're set up, you can do your up, down, left, right fire with the 4 face buttons, and then maybe combine them to do your diagonal fire, similar to what Smash TV or Total Carnage would have done back in the day.
Well, I like to see a Jaguar port where we can finally get a use for those bottom buttons on there. Press 3 to fire up.
Oh my!
Yeah, and I can't wait till 10 years from now, someone's got a collection that's entirely made out of ports of Xenocrisis.
Oh wow!
Well, you've seen people do some pretty crazy stuff. Like the guy who had a chair built out of Dragon Warrior cards. I could see someone just yep, this is my Xenocrisis collection. I got every single release. We got the Nuon, the CDI. We have the Tiger R-Zone release. And the Game.com release. The GameCube, the Wii. We even have the N64 release. We've got the Switch release. Now you can play it with dual switches in tape mode.
Huh.
I'm sure this thing's going to get released every. And why not? I mean, this is a good way to recoup costs. But it's interesting. I think probably the GameCube will work pretty well. I know the Switchboard is excellent. The Genesis is pretty good. The Dreamcast is not bad. I'm wondering how many more consoles they could actually actively port this to. Maybe.
I mean,
maybe they'd say "Hold my beer." It surprised me.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they didn't continue porting it all over the place.
Me too.
Tatsugen Company has started a YouTube channel. And I think this might coincide with what was supposed to be their presence at the Tokyo Game Show. And so this would be interesting to kind of see what develops from this, if the rumors are true and they actually have a new game in development.
I wonder if they're broadcasting from the Intergalactic Space Station.
That is a good possibility.
Everybody remember to play Truxton. Interstellar Sentinel has been released on Steam. This is a game that I don't remember. I'll have to take a look at it. Do you know more about this?
Not too much, but it looks good based on the video that I saw so far.
Does this have does this have a soundtrack by the Beastie Boys with Intergalactic?
No, it does not. But
yeah, it does look pretty fun. It looks like it was originally a mobile game.
Oh, that might have been. I know the developer was posting stuff on YouTube, gameplay videos and sort of beta testing videos.
Well, I'm looking at a quick screenshot here, and it's got the circles with the sticks in the bottom corners. So I wonder if that's there because it's part of the mobile game. It doesn't mean it's bad. There's been several games of this, but yeah, it definitely looks interesting.
Sure.
In some ways, the art style or the ship reminds me a little bit of like the R9. Yeah, it's definitely got an interesting art style. Worth a look.
Yeah. Pretty big news here. Radiant Silvergun has been announced for a Steam release. There's no price or release date information yet, but you can wishlist it.
Very nice. I like this. Radiant Silvergun is finally coming to everything as it should.
Indeed.
Yeah, this is probably the same one. Wasn't this being done by the Revive Cave? Was that right?
Well, yeah, I think it might be Livewire.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Livewire. Oh, sorry, not Revive. Yeah, Livewire and Livewire was doing. They're doing this in collaboration with Limited Run, right? They're putting the whole soundtrack on the cart for the Switch. So I wonder if we're going to get the full packages ported over to the PC. That'd be nice if we could get. If Livewire is doing this, that this would be just the first of many titles. This would be nice to get Espeleta 2 there. I think that DFK is already there, right? DFK is on Steam.
Right.
But to get maybe an updated port of Mushi would be pretty good.
Yeah?
More shmups, please.
Of course.
Toplan Arcade Shoot 'em Up Collection Volume 2 has been announced from Bitwave Games, slated for an August 24th release on both Steam and GOG. This includes Slap Fight, Ishuzame or Flying Shark, Fire Shark, and Hellfire. Definitely some good games on this. Hellfire, I wonder if they're going to include both versions. The Mega Drive, well, you get the Mega Drive Arcade and the Turbo PC Engine CD version.
Yeah, I don't know. M2 is including that in their release, but I don't know about what's going to be included in the Bitwave release. My thought is it will probably just be the arcade versions, but I don't know.
Didn't Hellfire also come out on Arcade Archives?
No, it did not.
Okay. I must have gotten it confused with Mr. Port.
Counter-Attack Uprising from Relative Games is coming to Nintendo Switch in Q3 2023. Counter-Attack has been available on Steam and Xbox for some time. This is one that I have not played. I want to say that Counter-Attack has been in my wish list for a while, but I just haven't taken the plunge.
Yeah, this is new to me as well. I wish I would have said that I haven't played it, but I have to take a look. It looks pretty cool. It sort of it reminds me of the another game that we need to cover, Shield Maiden, right?
Sure.
It definitely has that type of style. Moving on to one I have played, Mooley's Dreamland from developer WoWo. Was it WoW? From developer WoWo Cat and publisher OK Joy, released on Steam August 1st, and is a horizontal shoot 'em up where you play as Mooley, the fox fighting off monsters in her dreams. I tried this back when it was still early access, and I had a really good time with this. It reminded me a lot of Never Awake, but more with the cute aesthetic to it. There was a spot early on where she's in her bed dreaming, and the cat jumps on the bed, and all of a sudden the extra weight becomes sort of like this giant enemy. There are just sort of neat little ways to deal with the mind of a child and her imagination. For people who are looking for sort of like aesthetic, it reminded me a lot of Neko Navy, with maybe a little bit more anime.
Huh. Yeah, it definitely looks promising. The Ray's Arcade Chronology is now listed on Steam to wishlist, but no release date or pricing info as of yet.
Yeah, with this one, I think it's sort of a teaser saying, yeah, you wish you were playing this.
Well, I know that M2 is not big on doing the PC releases, but it's something that I think Taito wanted with the Darius collections that they've done. So my guess is they just, it was part of their contract to do the same thing here.
Hey, I'll take Steam ports.
Absolutely. These games definitely need to be out there more than they have been.
Speaking of which, when this is something I thought about when I was thinking of Panzer Dragoon. This feels like this could have been something that Panzer Dragoon could have been turned into. Right? If you were going to make a shmup out of Panzer Dragoon, you would pull a page out of Ray Storm or Ray Crisis.
Sure.
From developer-publisher Shuru comes Vacant Kingdom, a new action RPG with twin-stick bullet hell battles as an experiment to try and combine the genres together. Another twin-stick story. This... that's all, folks. I definitely do like twin-stick shooters, and this looks like fun. I'll have to give this a try.
Famed developer Masahiro Sakurai has released a video on his YouTube channel titled Game Essence in Shooting Games, discussing design concepts in the genre.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, does that have a translation?
No, but I it's not a very long video, and I thought it was fairly easy to follow. And if I remember right, there are subtitles.
Yeah, it's a good thing that he did it, because if Zune had done it, it would just be him drinking beer. That is his essence for his games: beer and lollies.
Right.
A translation patch has been released for Gokujo Parodius to translate it to Fantastic Parodius. Now all 3 Super Nintendo Parodius titles, or Super Famicom Parodius titles, are playable in English. I just started thinking of someone probably would do a translation as a joke. They would take all the sayings from, replace all the talking from the fairy in Ocarina of Time. It says, hey, hey, hey. Yeah, there was definitely good to be able to play talking or Fantastic Proteus. There was Steel, not Steel Empire, Operation Steel has a great spin on this as well.
Oh, yes, yes.
With Toot Toot Chugga Chugga.
Right. Luckili's Cup, the periodic shmup-based competition from Dent 4F, is returning in October. Signups begin in September, with more details to follow.
Nice.
It's been a little while since I've heard anything about Luckili's Cup, so cool to see that that's still happening.
Angeline Trigger is a Space Harrier style shooter in development from Pixel, with a 2024 release date. Currently playing for Nintendo Switch. I wonder how many different Space Harrier inspired games there are. I mean, even with Space Harrier, you have 3 games, right? Space Harrier 1, Space Harrier 2, and then you have the Fantasy Zone one, Space Fantasy Zone. And let's see.
Well,
yeah,
and then the Planet Harrier's arcade game.
Yep. With the one with the nurse on there. That game, I don't think ever came out anywhere, did it? That was exclusive to the arcade.
I think so.
And then what? Then you have the Famicom title, the one with the animals. I can't remember the name of. That was similar. Yeah, my point is, you definitely don't see a lot of Space Harrier style games. So anyone we can get is definitely welcome.
Well, it seems to be something that we're seeing a little bit of a resurgence of here lately, because you've got that Yu Suzuki game, and this one, and there was one other, I think, recently that's a Dojin title. So someone must be feeling a bit of a Space Harrier renaissance here lately. All Call is a shmup minigame from Nizikashi, available on itch.io. It can be played in the browser or downloaded to play on Windows, and takes inspiration from Fantasy Zone.
Nice. And the last thing we had from Fantasy Zone was Blackbird, right? So it's good to see another game in that vein. I looked up real quick, and the title I was thinking of is Attack Animal Gakuen for the Famicom.
Okay.
Yeah, play it on Mister. I don't think it's worth seeking out an actual copy of that. Sorry, and in regards to a shmup minigame on itch.io, that sounds like fun. Play it on the browser.
Yeah.
All right, Red Titans from Team Black Hat Robot is out on Steam now. Do you have more information on this?
Not much. I know that a couple of people in one of the other shmup discords were saying that their first impressions weren't great, but it very much looks like an old school 16-bit era arcade shooter. So I don't know, could be worth a look. From developer Orange Capsule and publisher Square Pillow Games comes Paper Planes Plus on Steam. There's no release date that has been set, but it has a very cartoony, creative hand-drawn look. And this one sort of came onto my radar kind of by accident. I had raided Lord Shmup on Twitch the other day, and after doing so, there was a little bit of discussion about it in chat, and I guess the developer or the guy, there was someone from Square Pillow Games that was in chat and was talking about it. So this is definitely something that I did not have on my radar, but I do now.
Yeah, definitely has that art style again of Neko Navy, right? It's got that quirkiness, so I'll definitely have to keep an eye on this.
Yeah, I added it to my wish list, so hopefully I'll be able to see more here as we go along.
Yeah, your I wish I was playing these games now list. Magical Blaster is forthcoming from Dojin developer Reverse Snare, and a trial version is slated for release on August 13th. This is another witch-themed horizontal shooter. The same dev who did the vertical shooter, Stolen Explosive. A demo is available from the Reverse Snare itch.io page. This seems to be another genre that seems to be exploding recently, is witch-based shooters. And we have Cotton and what Trouble Witches. I think that there was something similar. I think there was a VR game for Little Witch Academia, and then there's Hazelnut Hex. There's definitely a lot of. We could do our own Halloween all witch-based shooters episode.
Yeah, this seems to be a thing that is coming back. I'm not sure what the impetus was for that, but why not? Mad Shark from Alumer has released on Arcade Archives as of August 8th. Mad Shark, otherwise known as Raiden Gaiden, as a lot of people on Twitter were calling it. I was reading something about this the other day where apparently one or more of the team who worked on the original Raiden may have defected to Alumer or worked with Alumer to make this game, and it is very Raiden.
Hey, more Raiden, I can definitely get behind that. As long as it's not Raiden Trod. In very exciting news, the release date of M2's port of Dodonpachi Daiojo has been announced as December 7th. Switch and PS4 standard copies will be available, as well as a limited edition package on both platforms. Pre-orders are already available on Amazon.jp. And count me in for this one.
Yeah, this is a must-buy. The winners of Some Guy's Shmup Game Jam called Gunner Parade 23 have been announced. Those are Stardust Sinner by Crow's Nest, Locked to Arcadia by Kolumos, and Chonijiden Iridescent Force by Kaluyan Iklapi Z. And all three games are available from the Gunner Parade 2023 Game Jam page on itch.io.
Retro Gaming Live has opened submissions for Shmup-tember, a live event scheduled for September 22nd through the 24th with live gameplay. Very nice. I think the rise of the festival, and I don't mean Festivus for people who are thinking that, but no, the rise of the game festival is sort of an interesting thing that's been taking place. We have Shmup Slam that's going on. We used to have all games done quickly. I'm sure I didn't say the name just right, but summer games done quickly.
Oh, sure.
And then we have, it's good to see that a lot of these grassroots festivals are happening. As the excitement shouldn't be limited to AAA and E3. It's something that we should be able to have more in and see people experience, or even stuff like MagFest, where people are getting together, or the Milwaukee Gaming Expo. I'm not sure what the name of the one is in Arizona, but I definitely know there's one there, and then PAX. These type of shmup focused grassroots stuff, and I hope they continue to be held and continue to grow now that we are working our way out of the COVID era.
Right. Shooting Game Builder, which has been the foundation of many Japanese doujin STG over the past decade plus, is finally coming to Steam on August 18th.
Everything's coming to Steam, and that's good.
Yeah, this is a good development. Even though we have the Shmup Creator Tool from Bulo Studio and other stuff out there now, this has been such a big element of the doujin community for so many years that it's nice that some of this will be available to us in the West, and also because this might also open up maybe more possibilities of some doujin titles coming over to the West as well. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I like hearing about these kinds of developments.
Yeah, and hopefully it opens the doors or becomes the gateway for more Western developed shmups.
Absolutely.
Trigger Hard Excelia has been confirmed for a physical Switch release in Japan on December 14th from Cosmo Machia. No word on a Western version yet. We hope it comes soon and we can all spin our way to victory.
Yes, spin it to win it. New indie shooter G-Scramble is available on Steam. It has a distinct throwback visual look to it. As I was watching the trailer video for it on Steam, I was kind of getting late 80s, early 90s arcade meets DOS shoot 'em up sort of vibes.
Yeah, it's almost like you get from a it looks like you get from early 90s, VGA style shmup that was a doujin based. Yeah, I'm not quite certain what the portraits are, but apparently it comes with lollies. I don't know.
Oh.
Well, I'm watching the Steam video and I could see there's portraits of girls on the side. So when I say girl, I don't mean it's like More like probably character select. It's like outline or silhouette of the character select, not a plus 18 title.
Oh, I
Not
see.
not not a not safe for podcast game. uh,
Oh,
no, one of the other things I was thinking about here is that we're talking about twin stick shooters, and this is just you and me talking here. But one of the twin stick shooters is Vampire Survivors. We'll probably have to cover that
oh,
at some
right.
point.
Yeah, maybe so.
The team developing Gunstream for the Game Gear is still hard at work on it, but in the meantime is putting out a small number of physical cartridges of the Caravan mode for fans who want it. Alright, sign me up. I want some. Caravan mode is perfect because I think that's about how long the Game Gear's batteries are going to last.
Yeah. Developer Zakichi is planning on updating Kaikon to work with Steam leaderboards so it can be re-released commercially. We'll have an updated soundtrack as well, but no word on the release date yet.
Nice. Yeah, leaderboards would definitely be fun. Always like it when we can have leaderboards with the game, so that makes it easier for us to get the scores for the month.
Right.
Oh, and the Toho news for the month. The new Toho fan game, Toho Juin, Unfinished Dream of All Living Ghosts, is now on Steam, courtesy of publisher Mediascape. I would normally say this would be STG, but with Toho fan games, for all I know, it could be a racing / Monopoly / life sim.
Yeah, there's so much Toho stuff out there now, but yeah, there's still a lot of Toho fan shooting games that are being developed.
Yeah, the amount of Toho media is just staggering and this is just even the unofficial stuff.
Right. Polyfury is a new Danmaku-style shooter that combines a Tempest or Gyrus style of around the playfield design with bullet hell patterns and mechanics. And when I looked at this, it sort of visually reminded me a little bit of the sort of Atari Recharged series of games that they've been doing. And it has a little bit of that line art throwback. What's the word I'm looking for? Not retro wave, but that sort of neon kind of.
It's probably got
vibe.
It's got the vector style vibe.
Not quite vector, but
okay.
Maybe mildly inspired by that, I'll say.
Fair enough. Red Art Games is teasing what appears to be a release of Shikigami no Shiro 2 for release. Alright, let's get our terrible voice acting in. I don't want that to be DLC. Put that on cart.
And props to Bear78 for dropping this in the Discord, because I had not heard this, but apparently it was a tweet that they put out. And if you look at it, you'll see that it's the tweet, or the tweet itself shows it's an orange. It's a two-tone orange image. So it's a light orange background and a darker orange foreground. But when you look at it, it's a silhouette, basically. And someone posted a response to the tweet with the cover of the Shikigami no Shiro 2 Dreamcast cover. And you can see that's exactly the design that they were going with. So even though we don't have the official release yet, I'm going to say, based on that comparison, this is probably all but confirmed.
Yeah, Red Art has been doing some interesting stuff as a publisher. They definitely pull out niche titles. Even more so than when limited run these days, when they say, they're more like a AA publisher at this point, right? Ever since they got Embracer Group. But if you're looking for stuff that is outside the norm. Red Art Games is where you want to be looking. They did the D-Lit and Wonder Labyrinth. I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff that they've got their hand, but it's all been niche titles.
Right.
So hats out to them for continuing this up, and hopefully I can pick up some more of this. I'm trying to think. There was like a card battling game that they did. The only one that sticks on top of my head was the D-Lit, though.
Well, they've done a number of them over the past few years.
Didn't they do Void Core, or is that someone else?
Yes.
All right. So let's move on to the games. Let's move on to the game we played for July of 2023, and the people who played it with us. That game was Panzer Dragoon, which came out on the Saturn, the PS2, PC. The remake came out on the PS4, and good old games. There's so many different ways to play this. I have to say probably the PC port will be one of the better ones, or maybe even the PS2 port, but you can't really go wrong with the original Saturn port. The people who played it with us are Duke Togo, Pony Trigon, Schlarp, Drake Tunston, Varieg, Super Goat, and Orc Commander. So let's go ahead and start talking about Panzer Dragoon. Panzer Dragoon was developed and released by Sega in 1995 for the Sega Saturn. It was launched in it was the launch title in North America. All right, so let's start by talking about Panzer Dragoon. Panzer Dragoon was developed and released by Sega. Jeez. All right. I'll just start from this line here. Panzer Dragoon was developed by Team Andromeda and released by Sega in 1995 for the Sega Saturn console. It was a launch title in North America. The series was created by Yukio Futsugagi, who led the development for the first three games under Team Andromeda, as well as Phantom Dust on the Xbox, and Panzer Dragoon's spiritual sequel, Crimson Dragon. Panzer Dragoon was released for Windows in December 1996. October 1996 also saw the release of a Panzer Dragoon OVA, or Original Volume Anime, on VHS, which, for those of you who are curious, it deserves a place alongside the Star Wars Christmas special. The Windows version was ported to the original Xbox and included an unlockable and the Smilebit developed sequel, Panzer Dragoon Orta, which was released in 2002. So the Windows port was added on there, but it also has sort of like a caravan mode, right, where your health is constantly draining. You fill it up by destroying enemies. Panzer Dragoon was also released on the PlayStation 2 in Japan under the Sega Aegis 2500 series of budget titles in 2006. It adds an arrange mode that cleans up the 3D graphics somewhat and includes additional options. Megapixel Studio developed from the ground up a remake of the original game, which was published in 2020 by Forever Entertainment and released on the PC, PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, as well as Amazon Luna and Google Stadia. The cover art for the original Japanese release and later PS2 version was done by noted French comic artiste Jean Mobius Guillaud. And I have to say, his art is fantastic. It wasn't just the cover. They drew enemy designs and other inspiration from his works.
Right.
The North American release is okay at best, and the European release is a little bit worse than the North American. I mean, it's sort of that's just early 3D games. at the time they looked really cool, and some of them have aged better than others. But sort of using the "this is what you get" look on your front box art, like the black box was on the original Nintendo, just isn't as aesthetically pleasing as you'd see from the Japanese cover, but by quite a bit.
True.
Although I think it would be quite funny to see what would happen if someone decided to do and Miyamoto did this for Super Mario Brothers, but to see an artist rendition of, let's just say, tennis on the black box or volleyball.
Right.
Yukio was only 23 when he pitched the idea for Panzer Dragoon to Sega, who were looking for more games to add to the Saturn launch library for variety. And it wasn't just the Saturn's launch library was having trouble, it was in deep trouble. You had Daytona and you had Virtua Fighter, and people were looking forward to playing Virtua Fighter, and the port that was done was notoriously awful. So bad that they had to give out a Virtua Fighter remix version to people who had bought the Saturn, but this wasn't until much later. I don't know if you were one of those people who bought the Saturn at launch, or if you picked it up much later, but I remember people were at the time saying, no, get Virtua Fighter 2. Don't even bother with Virtua Fighter.
Yeah, I was way late, but I still don't own Virtua Fighter, but I do have Virtua Fighter 2.
At this day and age, it's. I think I'd probably rather play the 32X.
Oh my!
It's not a good port. The game is set on planet Arrakis, where the spice melange was constantly being fought over by the noble Atreides, the insidious Ordos, and the evil Harkonnen. Whoever controlled the spice controlled the Tex-Mexium, and whoever controlled the Tex-Mexium controlled the universe.
Well, yes.
No,
we all know the power of Tex-Mexium.
Yes, we do. But no, the reason why I bring this up, and for those of you who don't know, that was a sort of the plot to Dune, Frank Herbert's great sci-fi series, where this game takes a lot of inspiration from, especially Stage 2 with the sandworms. But the post-apocalyptic mixed with fantasy is something that Dune is definitely known for, and is cited by this game as being one of the major inspirations. So this game is set in the far future, where humanity is constantly at war with bioengineered weapons it has created. When the Empire discovered an ancient tower in the lake near the capital, they found ancient weapons that were used to fend off the monsters. Soon, however, the power corrupted the Empire and they took over the territory instead of simply freeing humanity from the enemy threat. The game centers around protagonist Kyle Fluge, who gets separated from his hunting party and stumbles across a conflict between two dragons. When the rider of the blue dragon is mortally wounded, he communicates psychically with Kyle and asks Kyle to take the blue dragon and now not allow the black dragon to reach the tower. Kyle takes up the rider's weapon, mounts the dragon, and sets off to follow the black dragon. You know, a lot of this is explained a lot better in that paragraph than anything you'd ever get by watching that cutscene. Because you're trying to figure out what these people are going in there, they're shooting stuff, and then this thing comes back, he goes into a cave, comes out, and then there's something in the background, some sort of tower. It says Unit 1 ready, and it says Unit 2 ready. And then this guy comes down, and he's, instead of like showing psychic powers, I think his hand is like shaking. And all this is done through like a postage stamp video, which, you know, I get it. Hey, I played those games at the time, I get it. But it's just so bizarre. I get part of the reason why they're doing it, but it's something that could have just been told better, maybe in like they do with the GameCube Wind Waker. Wind Waker does a really great way of setting up the story. It could have been done a little bit better, but I do like the. I guess we'll have to call it Dragonese, right? The mixture of languages. It's like Russian, French, German, and Greek. Words are all used when they speak.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be kind of its own language, but yeah, it's probably derivative of several things.
Yeah. It doesn't have anything upon the huge impact upon the game, and the lore definitely goes places and can be considered Dark Souls-ish, trying to figure out what the heck everything is, because all the world building is done for the most part outside of cutscenes. It never explicitly tells you sort of what's going on. Regardless, it's still an interesting story. Basically, I think you consider it Skynet. The ancient humans created this. Were constantly at war. They ruined this planet, and when they ruined this planet, he created the sentient AI, and the sentient AI uses these towers to build these bioengineered mutants that sort of keep humanity in check and keep them from becoming or starting more wars. Or it's a sort of like a nuclear check, right? A nuclear guarantee to prevent mutual destruction in order to keep humanity from getting too full of themselves. This AI sort of keeps track and builds these bioengineered organisms. But the dragon in this is a mutation of a bioengineered organism that has melded with. It talks about this in Y, right? The second one, where the dragon it is a mutation that's attached itself to like a sheep or so. Sheep may be a bad example, but it mutates the animals there and sort of become itself. And the dragon continues to morph. And I think they sort of imply that the same dragon is used throughout the entire series, right? It starts with 2, goes on to the first one, I think, and then goes on to Azel, and then goes on to Azel or RPG, and then goes on to Saga, if I remember correctly. Or not Saga, the Xbox game.
Orta,
thank you.
Right. Well, and I forgot to mention it in the notes, but also probably it's also the one that's in Panzer Dragoon Mini on the Game Gear, which is sort of a Fantasy Zone style take on the Panzer Dragoon idea.
I think Kyle, even though they don't explicitly say it, ends up in it was either RPG or Orta.
Oh, interesting.
Where they mention it, there's a guy who used to be a hunter, but now went to the Imperial Academy and is like teaching or something like that.
Huh. Well, and I saw something that mentioned that, I don't remember if it was on, but it was on one of the sources I was looking at that said that apparently the name of the protagonist who's flying on the dragon is only mentioned in the Japanese version. It's not mentioned in the US version, at least, which is kind of interesting.
Right.
So, anyway, let's dive into the game.
And I don't think the dragon name is really ever mentioned except for in the guidebook or some stuff where the dragon's name is Blar, which sounds like sort of a very weird, almost sort of like a bad Dracula impression, right? Blar, or maybe I'm a bad monster impression, but it's spelled Blaur.
Huh. Weird. Let's move on to talking about the gameplay here. So as we have kind of been alluding to, Panzer Dragoon is what we consider shmup-adjacent, which is why we've covered it here. But it is a rail shooter with a 360-degree view. And by that, I mean you can view the area in the game in 90-degree increments, and you use your shoulder buttons to switch your view. And so your default view is right in front of you, and then you can use the shoulder buttons to turn either left or right to then view what's to the left of you, what's to the right of you, or even what is behind you. And of course, this is woven into the gameplay and is a necessary feature to use so that you can take on various enemies and threats as they appear throughout the stage. On the Saturn pad, buttons A, B, and C are all used to fire. And so each button can be used to fire your regular shot, or if you hold the button down, your targeting reticle will spin, and then that will put you into targeting mode. And when you move your targeting reticle then over an enemy, you'll see a little circle thing appear around it, noting that you've targeted that, and then when you let go of the fire button, then it will shoot out a homing laser. And then again on the Saturn pad, the X, Y, and Z buttons are to change the view. And so the X button is for the standard view. The Y button selects what's called the dynamic view, which kind of zooms in closer to the dragon. And then the Z button is the long range view, which is more zoomed out and makes the dragon and the rider smaller and kind of gives you a larger view of the play field. Now I'm curious as to what your preference is on the view, because I generally went with the long range view just so I felt like your dragon was smaller and was obstructing less of the view.
I stuck with the default view, the standard view, and that was the view I used for the game. I played it a heck of a lot more on the remake than I did on the original Saturn version. The Saturn version is the one that I played so much of when it originally came out, or as everyone else likes to call it, back in the day. So at release, I played a lot more of the Saturn version, and I say after playing the Saturn version and playing the remake, I found I quickly just switched over to the remake. So I didn't spend a lot of time.
Oh, sure. Interestingly enough, the remake ditches the three views, probably because it is already it's in widescreen, so it's already going to be zoomed out quite a bit. But I think they sort of made the view in the widescreen version a nice compromise, I guess, so that they wouldn't have to necessarily go through and give you the different view options. But I definitely found myself favoring the long-range view, so that the dragon and the rider on screen was smaller and did not obstruct as much of what you could see off in the distance. So that's what I tended to use the most.
Makes sense.
Now the game is split into 6 episodes, as it calls it, or stages, and then there's a 7th final episode that is just the kind of final confrontation with the last boss. And so episode 1 sees you flying over what looks like a kind of the flooded remains of a once great city with large columns and ornate buildings in ruin. Various monsters attack through the level, some of which we see again in later stages, and some of which are unique to the area. The boss here is the Naraka class Imperial battleship, which then shows up in kind of a smaller form as a regular enemy in later stages. One of the common tropes that we see in video games.
Yeah, this boss having to destroy the different parts on it, and then especially in the remake, it's a lot clearer to see the different parts and see the damage as you're destroying it and having to shoot down the shots from the cannon. It really does a good job of making you feel like you are in an epic fight.
It does. And one of the interesting things here is that this is one of the things that I think makes the game a bit more cinematic, is that you can't end the boss fight early by hammering the boss with fire and with homing shots and stuff. There are certain phases and things that it has to go through, basically. And so there are a couple of spots where you can only damage it to a point until you're ready to move on, and then eventually you can start damaging it again. So it's kind of an interesting deal where some of what is in the boss fight is very prescriptive in that sense. With episode 2 is set in the desert with large sandworms jumping in and out of the sand. You've got then they're shooting these green globules at you. I'm not sure what else to call them. You also enter a cave and have to fend off a number of enemies that crawl along the sandy bottom, and some of those enemies will actually jump up at you. There's one spot where you come to a stop and you have to use the shoulder buttons to kind of turn 360 degrees around as enemies come up out of the sand. So, like I said, some of which will jump right up at you. And then once you emerge from the cave again, you confront the sandworms again. And the boss at the end of the stage here is your first encounter with the Black Dragon, or what's known as the Prototype Dragon in the remake.
Yeah, the sandworms are definitely the part of, and as well as the terrain are definitely pulled straight out of Dune, which is a heavily influenced on it. There are several different video games or popular media that were using sandworms and desert as their locales. Tremors is definitely another one. And then a smaller one, Beetlejuice, was another one.
Sure.
Yep. It just seeps into popular culture, and it's a cool thing to do. The Black Dragon, when you're fighting on stage 2, I can't tell if it's controlling the weather when there's those tornadoes that are sort of around it, or if that's just typical desert. It's a sandstorm type thing. But it has this unique atmosphere, and kudos to Team Andromeda for having a very unique visual style. When you go through the cave, it doesn't feel like, oh, look, we got these gray textures everywhere. The environments themselves have a very lived-in or organic look, which is pretty hard to do when you're dealing with triangles and circles in a lot of the early 3D games.
Right. Episode 3 is a rocky, barren wasteland that appears to be an Empire stronghold of some kind, with a lot of cannon placements and mechanical structures and enemies to deal with. And the boss is the Prototype Imperial Assault Ship.
What's happening with it, it doesn't really ever spell it out, but what's happening in Episode 3 is the new types, basically the bioengineered that are being created. The Empire at the very beginning goes to investigate this tower, which is what Kyle sees fly over him as he's hunting. But by the time we get to episode 3, the Empire and the new types are basically the things that are coming out of the tower. These, so they look like crabs in the beginning intro, right? The big crabs that always have those white shells. Those are the bioengineered, and they are fighting against the Empire. And as you're flying through this, as the battle is taking place. So, as the new types are fighting the Empire for supremacy, you've got all the different cannon placements and mechanical structure. And then, as you mentioned, with the Imperial assault ship, it's sort of this... almost looks like a propeller, right? Well, you're having to go up and down in order to avoid the fire or the different blades with it shoot off, and it goes off. And I know there's a joke that you like to make, saying, this is even my final form. It really feels like a lot of these bosses have that saying in this game, where I think it changes at least 3 times.
Right.
Once you defeat the top on there, then you got to... the last part of it tries to get you from behind, and you've got to shoot it and destroy the last bit of its health from behind. It definitely does a lot of world building in episode 3 to switch from the organic into more of a civilization, which you'll get to when you get to episode 6, when we get to the Imperial capital. But it definitely does it great to make you feel like you're engaged in something larger than you. Similar to the way that Star Wars sort of, right? We got these little ships that Luke Skywalker is flying, a little X-Wing, but you have these huge capital ships around and everything else. It makes you feel like I'm part of a lived-in larger universe. One of the other things that I forgot to bring up earlier, Dune isn't the only part where it takes inspiration from. It seems Nausicaa Valley of the Wind was also a pretty heavy influence for this, and you could see this too with a lot of the designs for the architecture and the way that this post-apocalyptic environment or world is created.
Yeah. And this boss fight, a couple interesting things here. This is kind of the first spot in the game, I think, that I struggled with. In part because of the blades, where you sort of have to go up and down between them. But on the Saturn version, in particular, it's a little bit hard to kind of see where the blades are at. Visually, the cues aren't quite as good, just because of the nature of 3D visuals at that time. And so that was a little bit of an adjustment that I had to make there. But the other interesting thing is when you're fighting this boss and you're targeting it with your homing shot, there are some spots in different places on the boss that you can target. And depending on which part you destroy first, the top portion with the blades or the propeller kind of a thing, or the bottom portion, changes what the very last spot, very last section of that boss fight, it looks like. So that was kind of an interesting and a nice touch, I guess, that you could see the boss fight play out slightly differently at the end, because of that one little change.
Pretty neat.
Yeah. Episode 4 takes place inside a large enemy stronghold with long corridors and winding paths. Most of the threats here are either enemy ships or biomechanical monsters. There are a couple of environmental hazards as well. There's one spot toward the end of the level where these bay doors that open up, you'll have one that only opens up a little bit on the right hand side, and so you gotta kind of sneak through that, and then the next one opens up a little bit on the left side, and you gotta switch over and move so you don't ram into the door, and then the last one opens up kind of in the middle, but a small section of it, so you kind of have to position yourself properly so that you don't run into those.
See, this is the escape sequence. When you're trying, as the giant battle's taken on, you defeat your enemy, and you're trying to escape, and you've got all these different tunnels. This is an area where the aesthetics of the game really shine through, where it just you could have plastered a whole bunch of like computer-esque, like with lights and stuff, and turn it into what you see in a modern data center. But they didn't. They went with a almost tribal or ritualistic look on here, which definitely makes it unique. With the bones, it looks very similar to the way that the dragon looks, right? And everything in this culminates with you trying to escape back up to the surface, and you're fighting the flying robotic creature. I forget the exact name, but you're fighting this new type that is tracking you down and trying to kill you.
Right. Yeah, it's called Guardian, and that's a pretty cool boss fight, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Although I think that if you could have called things Guardian, I could have probably named it that, right? I like this thing that looks like a cat. I shall name it Cat. This thing that looks like a dog, I shall name it Dog.
Right. Episode 5 is over a large forest area with a lot of enemy battleships and fighters attacking you. And the boss is the Flying Imperial Stronghold. Yeah,
stage 5 or episode 5 in particular is pretty neat because you come out of the tunnel and you're coming into this huge tree area with you can finally see daylight again, and there's a lot of world building, subtle world building that's done here as you're fighting off all of these ships that are smaller versions of the boss from stage 1. You see little birds flying in the distance. They do a little trickery with suns in the treetops too. It gives a great way to make it feel like it's alive.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a tease, I guess you could say, because there's one point toward the end of the stage where it feels like you're entering a boss fight because it's a large ship that you have to take out, but that's not actually the boss fight. And so that is a little bit of a fake out, which was kind of neat, I think. And then episode 6 has you flying over a watery area that looks like either a city that's been converted to a military base, or maybe it's just a very large military base. The enemies here are very aggressive, and there are a lot of them to deal with on all sides. And the whole length of the stage, you are pursuing that prototype dragon, and it will attack you at different times. So, of course, you've got to pay attention to avoid its attacks while also fighting off other enemies as you're going along and avoiding their attacks. But there is no boss battle in this stage.
Yeah, episode 6 is something that unless you really had like the Japanese copy, you wouldn't know what the heck it is. But it has a map, and if you have the instruction book, and you're going through, starting off in this little cavern, then goes over a lake, and then it goes up, and around, and then stage 6 is the Imperial capital, where you're flying over this huge port city, destroying enemies, and then chasing in some cases it's called prototype, some cases it's called black or evil dragon, in order to stop it from reaching the tower.
Exactly. Which, of course, you fail, because then we have final episode, aka stage 7, where the dragon reaches the tower, and despite all your efforts, and then it transforms from its smaller size, which is relative to your dragon, into this much larger monster of a dragon, and it has multiple attack types. It'll shoot various projectiles at you. It has drones that will shoot lasers at you. Partway through its attack sequence, it can charge this powerful barrage of lasers that it will fire out at you. The drones can rush you, and then it also does this attack sequence where it kind of turns around through the screen, or a different kind of makes this circle pattern around the screen, and in doing so it can run into you, or it can sort of whip its tail at you. And then it can also shoot out a variant of the sort of laser wave thing that it shot out at you during the stage 2 or episode 2 fight.
Yeah, the dragon itself, it really reminds me, or at least the Morph Dragon or Evolved Dragon, it really reminds me of the dragon from Space Harrier. With the way it's patterned, the way it moves around, it's definitely fires a heck of a lot of you at you all at once. So you got to really be quick on the draw and quickly shoot down its projectiles. The only other thing that sort of drew me as a little bit funny was when it opened up the tower itself. It's got this orb in the middle, and it looks very similar to the Tower of Sauron from Lord of the Rings.
Huh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, once you defeat the prototype or evil evolved dragon, then the tower shuts down, and the tower gets close to shutting down, and Kyle is left behind. Right, he gets formed into a bubble as the dragon goes ahead, and then he wakes up on the seashore where you see dragon tracks, which sort of signifies, yes, the dragon's alive, and Kyle just goes, well, that's done. I might as well go do something else now. What do you do after that? You wake up on the seashore. Oh, well, that was fun. What do I do now?
Right.
What are you going to... Was you just go home and go, how was your day, son? Well, I started out by hunting these things. I almost died. I formed he doesn't even have a village to go back to. So what do you just go to a bar? Man, you wouldn't believe the day I had. What do you do? Maybe that's why no one sees him again. He drinks away his sorrows.
It's possible.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the graphics. I would have to say, despite the crudeness of some of the early 3D games during the 5th generation console era, Panzer Dragoon still looks relatively good, considering it's a launch title. And yeah, for the most part, most of the stuff stands out. There's a couple areas where, especially the plant enemies on the water in the first stage, looked a little blocky and were hard to figure out what the heck's going on. You mentioned the propeller boss on stage 3, having trouble discerning whether it was up or down, or where you should avoid. There's a little quirks, but it's not bad enough where your eyes instantly bleed when you look at it.
Yeah, it definitely... I still feel like it looks good for a Saturn game with early 3D, as you said, a launch title. It still has a pretty solid visual, presentation. Of course, all of this taking into account the time that it released.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about some of the enemies that made things hard to see or hard to determine. But some of the enemies' projectiles can be a little bit hard to see as well, and that's just because of the nature of the game with a low polygon count.
Right.
We talked about this earlier, but the aesthetics are very well done. The areas are varied enough not to be repetitive, and each has their own visual interest or style, right? Nothing ever felt copied and pasted.
Right, yeah.
The remake clarifies some things and changes some areas around a bit visually so they stand out even more, especially in the forest area. Yeah, the forest areas stand out of the original, and I would definitely say of the remake as well.
Yeah, the forest area in the remake is is gorgeous. And they really embellished quite a bit in terms of what they changed, what they added to the forest area to make it much more visually interesting than what the original game could offer.
And the remake also has a lot of flashing, so those of you who are sensitive to flashing lights may want to avoid it.
Yeah, that was one of the things I noticed, and somebody mentioned it on my stream, particularly because of how I was playing it. But when you shoot your regular weapon, there's a lot of flashing that happens at that time. So if you're shooting it rapidly, then yeah, you're going to see a lot of flashing on screen. It's not the whole screen, but it's enough to where it's pretty noticeable. Any other thoughts on the graphics?
No, I just want to highlight how impressive it is with the limited materials that they had to work with, and also being a launch title, how everything feels unique and does a really good job in world build, even if they don't explicitly state it, that you can sort of get the feel like the birds that were flying there, the sort of bone or ancient feeling with going through the tunnel, or the big fortress fight. Everything tells a story without being explicitly told. And and some might say that to this game's detriment, it doesn't really explicitly tell you a lot. But visually, it does a great job of saying stuff without using words.
Yeah, that visual storytelling is definitely a good element here. So let's move on to the sound. The soundtrack was composed by Yoshitaka Azuma, and it received a standalone CD release in Japan, even though the game disc itself had Red Book audio. And the soundtrack also got the vinyl treatment in 2016 by Data Discs in a 2 LP format, which I own. Part of the soundtrack is lush orchestral music, and then part of it is a bit more electronic and upbeat, though I would say often understated.
But that's another area where it mirrors Dune. If you watch the original Dune movie, it starts out orchestral and then switches on to more electronic, but they keep the tribal feel with the drums. And the drum sound they use, that's a copy of Dune, which, as you can probably tell, in fact, that it came out on so many times as being used as a reference, it does a very good job. The soundtrack is done so well, in fact, I would say that it could be considered the main character. Forget the dragon, forget Kyle. The soundtrack is where it's at.
Yeah. The remake includes an arranged soundtrack that leans more heavily on the orchestral approach, but it does change some of the tracks so that they sound a lot different than their original versions. In particular, the track for episode 1, known as Flight, you have to listen closely, or at least I felt like I had to listen closely because it was not nearly as recognizable as the original version.
Yeah, I played with the original version. It's the original version and nothing for me on this one.
Yeah. But I feel like the sound design overall is solid, though the main shot sound can get overwhelming in the mix if you're using rapid fire. And the dragon screams or voice, I'll say, in the game can be a bit screechy.
It can be a bit screechy, but it's well done. I mean, you feel like the dragon is in pain when it gets shot, right? The sound effects aren't they're not 100% balanced, but it does a really good job of making you feel like you are inside this world, right? The sound of the gun and the way the shots, especially the lock-on shot, is very well done. The dragon itself can be screechy, but it sounds like a dragon, right? You don't go, Oh, that's just a muffled lion roar. Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
You definitely adds to the game, and instead of just sort of being there along for the ride.
Yeah. I said this on stream, and I'll go ahead and say it here. One of the reasons this soundtrack is one that I wanted when the vinyl release was put out, even though I have the Saturn game, and of course, like I said, the soundtrack is on the disc, but Flight, the stage 1 music. Now, of course, the intro and title screen music, the intro cinematic music, that's all good. But when I bought my Saturn early on, I played a few things here and there, but I actually found when I was looking at the game on stream, I pulled it out and showed it, and apparently the receipt from when I bought it was still in the case. So I've had this game 20 years because I bought it in 2003. And when I booted up the game and played and got into stage 1 and heard this orchestral piece, Flight, in the first level, that is a top 10, if not top 5 moment for me in terms of Saturn gaming, of just the realization of, oh, well, this is different. Because up to that point, I hadn't really played many games that incorporated any kind of orchestral soundtrack, mostly because I wasn't a Super Nintendo gamer. I had the Genesis, and as you probably know, the Sega Genesis sound chip is not does not lend itself toward orchestral soundtracks the way that perhaps the Super Nintendo would. And so you got some of that with the Final Fantasy games on Super Nintendo and so forth. But yeah, this was one of those moments where I was just wowed by the music in this first area, and that really pulled me in. In addition to the overall atmosphere, that really hooked me.
Yeah, the soundtrack may be even more famous than the game itself.
It's possible, yeah.
All right, let's move on to scoring. There's not a traditional score in the game. Instead, you focus on a percentage of enemies shot down during each episode, and you receive a ranking at the end of the episode and the end of the game based upon your overall percentage. At the end of the stage or episode, you get credits that way, or continue credits. And at the end of the game, if you play on hard mode and get maybe it's just hard mode and complete it, but the one I saw you had got a pretty good percentage as well. You unlock the caravan mode, right, where your health constantly goes down, and you have to destroy enemies. Yep, but that's playing on hard mode. So let's move on to impressions of the game. Pony Trigon says, been meaning to find a good excuse to play this. How's the aiming on the Saturn version? My immediate thought was, we play like Star Fox, but nope. I noticed there was a classic and modern style of aiming. Classic feels similar to Star Fox. Modern feels weird. Not used to rapid firing on trigger buttons. Yeah, the classic feels pretty similar, felt right. And then I tried the modern, and I was that just sort of grew on me, even though it felt a little weird at first. And eventually, I just went with the modern display. But I could see how that feels definitely really weird, like using a right-handed tool in the left hand. Something just doesn't feel right.
Huh. Interesting. Duke Togo joined in and said, my Saturn is ready. And then later showed a picture of playing on his PVM. Jealous. And said, made it to the episode 4 boss. I really don't remember much of this game from back when, but it really holds up on the Saturn and looks good for its age.
Stage 4, okay, that was the Guardian, yep. That's still a pretty good run.
Yeah.
Schlarp says, I played the remake on the Switch, but we'll try this on Saturn. The internet says the aiming was not quite right in the remake. Curious if I spot a difference. I need to try a stick in both versions. For whatever reason, I played it with a controller. I just played until episode 2 on Saturn with an arcade stick. Playing on the stick is fun, but doesn't feel better or worse to me. Cool game with interesting music and a nice setting, but I played the remaster not long ago, so I'll stop here. I ended up extending my R-Type Final 1 and 2 playthrough, though. I gotta unlock them all.
Indeed. Supergoat says, first time playing, finished episode 1. So close. And had a screenshot showing a 99% shutdown ratio on the remake. First run through was a 4cc. Need to continue once on episodes 4. Needed to continue once on episodes 4, 5, and 6. The difficulty really cranks up, and the importance of dodging becomes apparent. There's also a little bit of memo that's necessary. Not a ton, but it helps to not be completely blind to what's coming. I think a 1cc will be pretty tough. There were certain shots that felt impossible to dodge because they come out pretty much instantly when enemies spawn, but there's a lot of opportunity to take less damage than I did. I'm not into rail shooters, but this one is pretty fun, and it gave a good sense of whether something was going to hit you, and thus how to feel confident in a dodge. Also, it took a while to understand that lock-on is supposed to be the main offensive weapon, and aim shot is really just for bullet canceling.
Drake Tunston says, I played some to test the Saturn core on Mister, but only played through the first episode. But it did lock up a couple times when I tried to start the game. Yeah, I haven't messed with the Saturn core on Mister, but only because I'm a crazy man who ended up buying 5. I think I owned 5, maybe 6 Saturns. I don't know. I went a little nuts. So, coincidentally, I think I own that many copies of the game for some reason.
Oh my.
Don't know how it happened, but it's just sort of just like my Wii Sports. Apparently, I had to keep on buying Japanese copies of Panzer Dragoon. I do have the US version, but I think I have like 3 or 4 copies of the Japanese version. I get the feeling that at some point, my son, my oldest, is going to go through some of the stuff going, why the heck do you have 8 copies of Wii Sports? Well, one for each day of the week, and one just because, I guess.
There you go.
Although I think that the amount of Wii consoles I own has probably outpaced the Saturn stuff. Yeah. I think I've got 7 or 8 Wiis at this point. I don't... Even I don't know why at this point.
Oh my!
And then I've, but and what 4 Sega CDs. I feel like I'm doing a Bad Days of Christmas song here with 3. What 3 Super Famicoms, 6 or 7 PlayStation 3s, 5 PlayStation 4. 3 Xbox Ones, and it just keeps on going. I don't know. This is how I live up to my username.
There you go. An Orc Commander said, cleared the remake since it was the easiest version to get set up. Hardest parts for me were the Stage 4 boss and most of Stage 6, since it's way too easy to lose a credit from taking too much damage with the ambushes at the beginning. Yes.
It's all right. So now that everyone has given their thoughts, what are your thoughts on Panzer Dragoon?
I like this game. It's one that I liked pretty much right away when I first bought it, and but it's one that I don't know, I guess I had difficulty with it at some level because I could always kind of credit feed my way to probably Stage 4 or so, but I don't know that I ever reached episode 6 ever. So to me, credit feeding through the game and being able to beat it after a few attempts, just credit feeding felt like an accomplishment. And then I reached the point where I was able to do it in 2 credits by getting a little bit better with stage 6, and then usually dying on the fight with the dragon and having to continue and redo that fight again because I would be so low on health at the end of stage 6. Because one of the things that we hadn't mentioned is that when you get to the end of a stage, if you don't have full health, you will regenerate up to half a health bar before you move to the next stage. But because I would get so decimated in stage 6, I would usually start the final boss battle with maybe a half a health bar or a little more. And I had trouble, particularly on the Saturn version, figuring out how not to get hit so much. And so I did the game, did that and credit fed it through it a few times. And they got to the point where I could do the two credit clear, one of which was a double KO. I was particularly salty about that. But I did manage to 1cc the Saturn version, which at the beginning of the month I felt was going to be an uphill climb. And then I was able to get it done within, a week and a half, 2 weeks. So I felt pretty good about that. And the remake, I actually was able to do a lot quicker, in part because, of course, I had already learned the game. And the biggest obstacle, I think, in the remake is stage 6. Honestly, the remake is a good bit easier than the Saturn original. And the only big difficulty spike is in stage 6. That really ramps it up quite a bit. Whereas the Saturn version, the difficulty doesn't feel like it spikes so much as it feels more of an organic difficulty curve. And then in the remake, I think stage 6 feels like a jump compared to everything else. But overall, I had a pretty good time with this, and I am definitely happy that we played this, and then I went back to it and was able to finally beat this game after all these years. You know, I never really focused on it enough to truly beat it. It's one of those games that I would be in the mood for periodically. I'd pull it out, play a few rounds, mess around with it, and then put it away. And so I'm definitely happy that we covered it, and I'm finally able to say that I have beat this game, I guess legit.
Very nice. Yeah, I'd have to echo the statement. I think that it was a game that I played through, enjoyed. Most of the time, we play like the first 2 stages, and then put away. Especially hearing the stage 1's music and the ambiance there, but never gave it a serious playthrough until recently. I do say that I feel like I like the remake a little bit better, at least now, but there's nothing wrong with using the original Saturn release or even the PS2 release. The world building it is so unique and very hard to do. Sega seems to be masters at doing sci-fi mixed with fantasy, which is extremely hard to do, but incredible when you get it right. I mean, look at Dune as midgets, or I know Nausicaa is not as much sci-fi, but if you want more of a pop culture thing to look at, I would say the original Star Wars trilogy and how much it resonates with people. The other part that Sega is very well known for with their sci-fi fused with fantasy is Phantasy Star. I mean, people love those games to this day, and create a resurgence of Phantasy Star Online. I a chance to play through Phantasy Star 1 and 2. I haven't done 3 or 4 yet, unfortunately, but really enjoyed the time I spent with those games. It shows that when something is crafted with care and attention, it can take care of itself. Or, you know, if we're going to go back to the Duke Togo example, Dark Souls, right? that never explicitly really tells you much, but allows you to explore on its own and figure out through clues visually with the world how nice it is. If someone were to come into this and try this today, I would probably tell them to try the remake versus the Saturn original. But playing even on the Xbox as the unlockable or playing Orta is still definitely a good choice. The only downside I found out with the remake is it's very Netflix and chill. I think it was like a first time, almost beat it entirely the first time I played it. Where the Saturn version definitely has a difficulty curve to it.
Right.
So either are good options. The music's fantastic, and it probably is the main character of the game. I highly recommend people take a look at it and give it a try, especially since it's, what was it, like $2.20 on GOG, and it goes on sale on the eShop or even on the PlayStation Store quite frequently.
Something like that, yeah.
I have spent $2.25 on a lot of worse stuff. Tell you that. So right. I think that if you're curious, definitely give this game a shot. It's a short game, and there are some places where, as you mentioned, it could be frustrating because each level is about 5 minutes. And if you get to the boss after you find the 5 minutes and you end up with a double KO or just die, it can be frustrating to go back and try again. But it's something that you don't come across often. So I'm still surprised that it's being offered for such a cheap price. But very cool to see that it still resonates with people. You know, what are we at here? Is it how old is it? 25 years? At least? At least 25 years later, yeah.
Yeah, we're approaching the 30-year mark.
Yep. Hopefully by then they do Panzer Dragoons. Why?
I'm hoping, one thing I'm glad about is that we didn't slot this in immediately when the remake came out, because I know that there were some issues with it on launch that had to be fixed. So I'm glad that we waited until some things had been patched and there were some refinements. All right, let's take a look at the scores. As we mentioned before, the game doesn't have a traditional point system. It just sort of rates you on the shot down percentage for each of the episodes. And so we only had a couple of submissions with that. I managed to get to be the only one, I think, actively playing the Saturn version other than Duke Togo. And so I ended up with a 90.2% shot down rating on the Saturn version, which in that one is the Dragoon ranking. And then on the remake, I got a 94.3% rating, which is sharpshooter. And then Orc Commander submitted a ranking of 87%, which is also sharpshooter from the remake. All right, so what do we have coming next?
Coming next, we have September. And boy, am I looking forward to it because it's hot around here. Now, coming next, we have, as we're currently in August, we are playing Kaikan, which is definitely surprising, especially for free STG. It's a heck of a lot of fun. And
yeah, this has been addictive.
Oh, using my own words against me. How you dare you play that Uno reversey card? All right. And then in September, we have Terraflame, which I'm looking forward to. I think Terraflame is out on the Switch now and is, of course, on the PC.
Yeah.
Or Steam.
And this one will scratch a little bit of that Thunder Force itch.
Oh, great. Now I got Thunderstruck by my head. All right. We also like to shout out a Trem for the logo. Everybody who has bought the podcast shirts or buying the Boss Pro Shmups stickers or shirts or hats, even they seem to be the envy of cats anywhere. So they'll picture the cat just staring, trying to figure out what that shirt is. Kogasu for the intro and outro music. Everyone from the Playcast and Collector Cast. And MetalFRO, who always makes things interesting with his parrot dogs.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that with the Boss Pro Shmups design, because that is back. It was gone for a little bit because there was a claim against it. It got taken down, but the design is back. I submitted the counterclaim, and then I reached out to Redbubble, who said they never heard back from Boss Pro Shops LLC, and when the claim is filed and then the claimant never actually follows up as to why they filed the claim, when a counter is filed, then they reinstate the design, which they have done. So now more people have gone and bought some stickers, hats, and shirts. So thank you to everyone who has been doing that. Hopefully we continue to see that go, and I can eventually have sold enough stuff to actually pay off the art commission in the first place.
I'm definitely glad it's back, and I can foresee it being added to all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next month.
Yeah, thank you everybody for your good 5 years. Hopefully many more.
Indeed.